Hello friends, I hope everyone is doing well today. Slight contrast from my last Pump Up the Jam workout video. I'm going to talk today about how I broke my addiction to stimulus. All things stimulus, whether it is media consumption or just life consumption in general. The modern Western need to fill every second of every day with something, and the pressure and the push that we must be doing something in order to be interesting or to have value or to be productive or to be worthy or to be making something of our life. I used to always subscribe to this mentality, and all that it led to, well, yes, some very good things did come out of it. I did get very out of balance and become extremely overwhelmed and have a lot of anxiety and depression and just really big burnout on a daily basis because I didn't know how to stop doing things. I couldn't stop moving. I was an overachiever and did a lot of great things, but in between those great things, I was not in any kind of balance. I was always consuming something or doing something. Now in my later years, as I approach 40, I am in a much different place, and I would like to share with you today that journey of how I stopped my addiction to stimulus. And now if I'm addicted to anything, it would be silence and or nothingness. I still have a lot going on in my life, balancing two different careers, but on the in-between, I find that I want to do less and less, and rather than judge myself for this like I would have in the past, I embrace it wholeheartedly and am going deeper and deeper into this practice of silence. So I'm going to share this journey with you today. I have my crystal friend here for really no reason other than I just wanted to show it. I have very few decorations in my home, but this is a special gift from my beautiful friend Andrew. He gave it to me when I went to go travel last year, and I wish I could remember the name of the stone, but it is, or the crystal, but it's very beautiful too. I was going to Oregon, and most of Oregon looks like this. It's just glowing green. But this, the crystal is meant to assist you in times of transition. So I myself am going through a big transition in that I'm going to be entering a new decade and new phase of life at 40 years old. I'm about to move, so I'm going through a big decluttering process right now. Stay tuned for the video on that, but there's already been some big changes coming around here at home for me. And if you're watching and facing any other transitions in your life, I offer this crystal to you to help guide you through them. And certainly reducing the amount of stimulus and your addiction to stimulus can really help ease that process and to growth and help you stay grounded and get to know yourself more as a human being and the highest version of yourself that you can express here on this planet. So I'm going to put the crystal down. By the way, if you have any name suggestions, I name inanimate objects, and I just realized that Crystal the friend does not have a name, so I'm open to some name suggestions. He's definitely a he, because I have a green plant that's a she, and I like things to be balanced. So let me know if you have any great name suggestions for Crystal friend, but let's get into the video. I do have the beautiful journal, the only paper I have in my house that I wrote with my one pen. This one, I did a timeline because this has really been a 12-year journey, I would say. This was not anything that happened overnight. Going cold turkey, cutting stimulus in Western society, especially I live in like Southern California, I would say is like kind of one of the epicenters of capitalism and stimulus and distraction of like the entire world. So this has been a long journey and definitely a process, and you will have your own unique timeline with it. Things will fall away when they're ready. You may have to challenge yourself in certain areas, but all of this was sort of a natural progression. And when I did hit points that were challenging, I didn't suffer through it in a way of feeling like I needed to deprive myself. It was more feeling like I really wanted to transcend addiction because I knew that there was a deeper and calmer and more wholesome way of living on the other side of it. So let's get to the timeline. Starting in 2012, wow. 2012, it's funny, there was in the Mayan calendar, remember everyone was like, oh, it's gonna be like the rapture, the world's gonna end, and well, nothing happened, but there was nothing on the outside, but I think there were subtle things. And I know a lot of friends from that year too. It was a huge shift. It was the universe kind of pushing like, okay, you can go this way or you can keep doing all your old shit. Which one do you want to do? So for me, it definitely was a very difficult year. I was suffering from massive anxiety, daily panic attacks, could barely eat, barely sleep. I was not doing good, and something major had to shift. I did not want to resign to just taking medication all of the rest of my life, like doctors said I needed to. I wanted to heal and to feel good in life and not just pop pills to be okay. I did end up taking some things for a very short time, which did save my life, but looking long term, I wanted to shift things in order that I would be okay. So the first thing I started to stop stimulus-wise in 2012 is I was partying a lot. I was a performing artist in Las Vegas, so I was going to all the big fancy club parties, and these aren't, just like casual parties. Like, this was Las Vegas and the entertainment business, so it was the massive nightclubs with the huge DJs and crazy sound systems and lights, and Vegas is a late night. For me, 11 p.m. is when the night was starting. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that was like prime going. And then oftentimes we'd be out till 4 or 6 or 7 in the morning still partying. And that is just not healthy on your nervous system. And those late nights and just all that crazy noise and stimulus and lots of alcohol and just tons of people everywhere on the Las Vegas Strip or in these ridiculous clubs or warehouse parties. Well, I did have, a good run with it. As I was getting to this stage of feeling really unhealthy with my emotional state, I knew that the partying had to stop. So that was the first sort of stimulus declutter realization of, oh my gosh, this way of living is not healthy for me. So I stopped going out to all those crazy parties. In 2014, a couple years later, I split with my long-term partner. We had been together for 7 years, and we are wonderful friends now, which is great. Hey, John, if you're watching. But back then, after a 7-year split, it was a big shift, and we had been living together for a long time, so I moved into my first apartment, and that meant, because most of the stuff from over the years was his, I was moving with sort of not a lot of furniture and not a lot of things, and I got my first taste of the true minimalism that has sort of become in later years, a cornerstone of my way of being, because initially I thought I would have to buy a bunch of stuff for my new apartment. Once I got out of all of that clutter and that maximalist life that we were living, I realized how much that stimulus was actually suffocating me, and I had space to breathe, not just physically, but also mentally. And with that, because of the TV, we had a huge TV, and like Blu-ray, remember that was such a big deal back in the day. It was his TV. So I had had a TV for so many years living with him, but then when I moved to my new apartment, I had no TV and found immediately that I did not want to buy one. One, I didn't have the money. But two, as I was in a space of deep emotional healing from the depression and anxiety I had had for several years before, and then also this new just relationship heartbreak of separating from someone after 7 years, I did not want to drown it out in TV. And just what I would do each day after work is sort of light a candle and listen to music. And it was a much deeper level of spaciousness that I had had in years, and something really resonated and started to tug at me and said that, yes, I need to go deeper with this. So while we were usually used to watch TV every single day, and there was Netflix back then, this is a while ago, there's not as many streaming services, but there was still a lot. We would watch all sorts of TV and movies every single day, and on our days off, the nature in Vegas, there's Red Rocks, but in the summertime, it's hot as balls, so we would just sit inside and watch TV all day, and that sucks. That is not how I want to live my life, and I have not lived my life since then, and so I've not had a TV since then, and don't miss it at all. Next, 2015, a few years later, or just 1 year later, after 2014, sorry, this was my first big wardrobe declutter. I can't say exactly what pushed me to it. I wasn't really watching minimalism content yet, but I was looking at this big wardrobe that I had. It was a big walk-in closet, and just realizing that I had so much shit I didn't wear, and I wanted to get rid of it. So I did a massive overhaul. I have some other decluttering videos if you want to check out that more in detail, but I count wardrobe as stimulus because there's so much decision fatigue that goes into planning an outfit or trying new things or going shopping or just looking through your wardrobe and having no idea what to wear and throwing it all on the floor and just having the energetic weight of everything sitting there. It was just something pushed my soul of I need to get rid of this stuff, and the more I would let go of, the better I felt. In 2016, I had moved to Los Angeles at this point, and I had a slight regression. It was my first year in LA. I was living smack dab in the middle of Hollywood, and I was working at a bar at this awful place called Cabo Cantina with like 32-ounce margaritas in these giant things, and it attracted just the most debaucherous, terrible people. And so I lived it up, the Hollywood lifestyle, and got heavy back into drinking again. Again, I was working at a bar, so it was mostly free, and then we would all go out together, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's 7 a.m. and I'm at some random millionaire's home in the Hollywood Hills, like still going hard. And turns out, yes, that is not sustainable, and that will make you feel like shit. And I was looking at some guys I was partying with were like in their 40s and 50s, and this is my early 30s at this point. I was like looking at that trajectory, and I'm like, I do not want that to be me, and I did not feel physically well. I was vegan at that time, but I was putting all this alcohol poisoning into my body, and I just had this revelation of like, why am I doing this? This is not what I want to do with my life. And it came to a culmination on New Year's Eve of 2017, going into 2018. I did one last hurrah at one of the bars I used to work at, and I got way too drunk and projectile vomited the next day, New Year's Day, when I wanted to have an awesome start to the year. I was so hungover, I wanted to die. And that was the last time I ever got drunk. And I had drank a few times scattered throughout the years after that, but I have a whole video dedicated to my why I quit alcohol journey if you want to check that out. But that was sort of the last regression of partying / drinking. I really quit drinking just a couple years after that. I don't touch alcohol anymore. I do not miss it. I do not miss the partying and the late nights. Like, yeah, it's fun. I've got some great stories from that, but that level of stimulus is just, it wrecks your nervous system. It can wreck your emotional state when you're pumping yourself filled with serotonin from alcohol. It will just totally deplete your reserves the next day and make you feel like absolute garbage. It's, if you're a casual drinker and have it here and there and it doesn't affect your life too much, that's cool. But for me, I found that I would just, I'm an extremist, so I would party and I would party hard, and it would just totally trash me the next day. And I did care about my health, and took care of myself as a professional athlete. I was still performing at that time, and I was vegan, but then I was like, what am I doing slamming Patron shots all night? Like, this sucks, I'm done. So that was the next level of stimulus to go. And I have not had any sort of party days since that night on New Year's Eve 2017. 2018, the next big declutter happened. I found more and more of my wardrobe I just was not wearing. This was when I really started gobbling up minimalism content on YouTube and was getting these big aha moments of, why do I have all this stuff? It still feels like it weighs me down. Every time I move, when you're moving from one apartment to the next, when I moved to Vegas to LA, or hopped around different studios in LA and had to put stuff in storage sometimes because leases didn't line up, it is such a pain in the ass. And I was getting to know myself more and knowing that I love to just be free and light and portable. And the more bags of crap and U-Haul vans and boxes you have to deal with during a move makes that way less feasible. So I got the itch to do more decluttering and more on top of my wardrobe. That's when I started tackling my sentimental items. I had bags of old costumes that I used to compete in as a competitive synchronized swimmer. I had boxes of old letters and photo albums, and I just took pictures of everything that meant something to me and then let that stuff go. And again, I lump this into stimulus because those things have a weight and a distraction level on you if you don't even realize. Even if it's a box of shit sitting in your closet that you never really look through on a day-to-day basis, it still has an energetic weight and it still has some fragment of your attention. And then if you are looking through it, even if it is going down memory lane, that's still something taking you out of the present moment and taking your attention away from what is happening right now. And I'm not anti-remembering the past. I do have some pictures, but the physical objects of things sitting around that are from years past can really take a toll on just your mental real estate and focusing on what is happening now, because what is happening right now is really all that we have. Also within that time period, this now we're getting into more media type consumption. I had not had a TV for years, but that good old Netflix app, I did have an iPhone, and I did have my ex-boyfriend's Netflix password still. Kept that one for a couple of years. So I was finding that even though I was working 2 jobs in LA, and they were both very difficult jobs, I was hustling at a restaurant and then working as a teacher and a choreographer and commuting in my car 2 hours a day, often doing 12 to 14-hour days and working 6 days a week. So I had one precious day off of free time, and after laundry and chores, it was just a narrow window of how I got to relax and recharge. And what was I doing with that time? I was binging the hell out of Netflix. Mad Men was a big one, but the biggest one was Grey's Anatomy. I'm like legitimately a recovering addict of Grey's-aholic, or whatever the hell you want to call it. That damn show had me so hard. I would just lay on the floor, lay on my bed, and just veg out and watch like 6 hours straight of Grey's Anatomy. And then my day off was over. And that is no way to balance and recharge and nourish yourself. And just being inside watching pretend people do pretend things. And it was really unhealthy. And luckily, to my benefit, what kind of like killed that stupid show for me was when they killed off McDreamy. Oh, Patrick Dempsey, so hot. But they killed him off, and I was like, oh, well, fuck this show. I don't want to watch it anymore. Like, that really just ruined it for me. And in that moment, I sort of got this aha of like, maybe I shouldn't be binging on these TV shows all day. Like, there's probably something way healthier I could do. So I actually deleted the Netflix app and stopped watching any kind of television on my phone. That was a big help as well. And coming off of that in the next few months, as you declutter these things, you may find that you can come to face your inner clutter a lot more, because all of these outer distractions are put there very conveniently to keep you from looking on the inside and dealing with the actual shit that is there. When you get nervous, if you can't stop doing something and you're nervous and you're anxious or you're worried or you're sad or you're just unsettled, that's the good stuff. That's what you need to lean in on. If you're putting these distractions as a cover to that, it's just a band-aid, and they're eventually going to blow up and cause you serious problems. Like I had a few years earlier, all of that depression and anxiety, it didn't happen overnight. It was a buildup of trauma that I had not been looking at and had just been distracting myself through various means, and it did cause huge problems that almost killed me. So as I was getting wiser and into my mid-30s, I realized these outer things were keeping me from being able to heal this unprocessed trauma. While I was doing a lot better with anxiety, it was still there on a daily basis, and I was just sort of managing it. So that's when I kind of had the light bulb. I had Snapchat, which that one I wasn't on too much. It's kind of dumb, and I feel like it's a little bit more for like 12-year-olds, I think. But Instagram, I had Instagram, and as I was a performing artist, I was supposed to have like my portfolio page, and I was realizing that some of these gigs that I was getting booked for, like I wanted to get booked because I was a talented performer, not because I had 100K following, and that was sort of the game in LA, and that was just really gross to me. Like I was seeing these girls at gigs I was dancing at that were not good performers, but they had that plastic surgery look and they had 1 million followers, so the company knew that they would promote their whatever brand, and that was the game. And so that really just turned off that world. And I noticed as I was scrolling, not once ever did it add value to my life. It completely sucked the life out of me. It was a soul vampire. It made me feel more depressed, more anxious, more shitty about myself, more just in the comparison game of, oh, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this with my life, that person's more successful than me, I'm a loser, blah, 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 blah. That shit's toxic. I have no interest in ever having that in my life again, even though I am here on YouTube being a creator. I try to be authentic and connect as organically as I can through this screen, but that is all I can handle. Instagram, I will never be back on there because it was just absolutely toxic for me. And so when I deleted that, I had about maybe a week or two of FOMO. That's what everyone worries about. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. Like that was actual literal poison for me. And just that's damaging to your eyes to stare on the screen that time, and just the influx of dopamine and like worrying about getting likes, like just absolutely not. So that was a huge thing to take out of my life. So in 2019, I had 2018, that meant no social media platforms of my own. I had no Facebook or any of the other ones that are out there. I can't even name them. But I did still have YouTube. I didn't have my YouTube channel back then, but I was consuming other people's content on YouTube. Moving on to 2019. This is as I decluttered those things and I found I had more space to just be, I started experiencing my first sort of dabbling with nothingness. And this was just stretches of mostly often listening to music because I was still so overstimulated and kind of anxious and not able to calm myself down that doing nothing still meant I was playing music, but that was still a big step for me because I was so used to just chronically doing something. So just long stretches of sitting and listening to music, often meditation style music, sound baths, or just like ethereal, whatever, or something that really made my heart sing, like film scores, and just sitting for a couple hours and listening to music. And my body started to respond really well. I noticed my anxiety levels started coming down. I started to feel, I had that feeling in LA of like being on a treadmill, like go, 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 go. And maybe some of you can relate to this. Like you feel like there's never this off moment and you are just drowning and trying to keep your head above water, and you may sleep at night and have a weekend or a day off, but because your body and your mind never have these off moments, you're just completely overrun. And that's certainly how I felt. So when I started experiencing these stretches of just listening to music, I found myself starting to get so much calmer. And while initially I did have some difficult stretches, especially at night, in like darker winter nights when my anxiety would just be running high, that's when that fix to start scrolling on Instagram or start, or to go out or to do something to distract myself would be at its highest. So one of the remedies I did for that is I just started journaling. I got like a big, like school notebook sized journal. And when I was sitting being anxious and wanting to grab something of stimulus, I would just write and write and write and write and write and write. And most of it was nonsense. A lot of it was really dark, not good stuff to go back and read. But it was really just like an energetic cleansing, sort of like a somatic release of all of that difficult energy and hard emotions that were in me. I was able to physically release it by writing and not just go back into the old stimulus addiction covering up pattern. Next, following later in the year in 2019, I moved to San Diego, and this was a massive improvement as well because living in somewhere like Hollywood, which is like one of, I was in Vegas for 8 years and then Hollywood for 4 years. Those are like two American/world epicenters of just overstimulus and overconsumption and just gluttony and ostentatiousness. And moving to San Diego, while it's still Southern California, it is a totally different vibe. And I moved to be on the beach. That was like a lifelong dream. Like I want to live on the beach after living in the crappy desert of Las Vegas and then the grimy city of Hollywood. And so I did. I found an amazing little studio and was like literally 2 minutes walk to the beach. And I got to really now connect with nature in a way that I hadn't in most of my adult life. And this was really healing as well, because when I started to find like, oh, when I'm in nature, like I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to listen to music. Certainly don't want to go drinking. I don't need to go out with friends. Like sitting, just being on the beach for hours is really, really nurturing my soul. And I feel better and I feel calmer. And I'm started craving more and more of these silences versus just trying to push myself into them. Following that, 2020, we all know what happened that year. Yes, it was COVID. I had the unique experience of going through quarantine completely alone. And so both my jobs, I worked in a restaurant and I was also a teacher and choreographer for synchronized swimming. Obviously, both of those got shut down. So I had about 3 months of being alone in my apartment and I didn't have family there, and I had split with my boyfriend guy, he was a situationship, but we had split during that time. So I was really just alone in my apartment for 3 months. And while I did get lonely, it was also a deeper experience of nothingness that I hadn't experienced yet, because one of the addictions of stimulus I haven't spoken about yet is being a workaholic. And while we are taught in hustle culture that work, especially in America, but it's all over. It's in Europe, it's in Asia, it's in, it's everywhere, but to different extents. The idea that you just need to be working hard and be a boss lady or boss man or whatever, and get up at 5 a.m. and push till midnight. And I was very much raised by that. And while I'm thankful that I do have that drive in me that has let me accomplish a lot of amazing things, I also got very out of balance. And that was part of the thing I noticed too in LA, of when I couldn't, my one day off where I wasn't working, and I always worked 2 jobs in one day, and there was like one day a week where I just worked one job, but it was like a really long shift. I almost had anxiety of my day off because I'm like, what am I gonna do with my time? Because work was actually a coping mechanism for me. Work was a crutch for me because I was so engaged and so active, and it would take such presence to either be hustling at the restaurant or working with my kids that it totally cut me off from having to deal with my own bullshit. And COVID brought that to a head. I couldn't do either of my jobs, and I was just by myself. And while it initially led to a little bit of anxiety, something just sort of flipped. I had started experiencing these first reliefs of like, just the deepest, all I can call it is relief of, oh, I don't have to actually do something right now. Like, it's okay if I just sit here and do absolutely fucking nothing. Like, that doesn't make me lazy. That doesn't make me a burnout. That doesn't make me wasting my life. Like, it's okay, and it's actually beautiful to just be right now. Like, I don't have to read a book. I don't have to listen to music. I don't have to go out with friends. I don't have to try and learn an instrument or a language or do a crazy workout to make myself try and look perfect, or I don't have to be looking for jobs right now. Like, I can just be, and that's okay. And it was wonderful. And I had never, ever experienced that in my life. Now, of course, it would come in waves and sometimes like fade out, and then I would get antsy and anxious, but it was my first kind of taste of life on the other side of being on the hamster wheel, if you will. And next, following that, 2021, I got a coming out of that silence. It's always interesting what comes out of those space, because I think your true nature does emerge in those. I got another urge to have a big declutter, and I think because I was quarantined for so long, and I did end up going back to work, but it was under like strange parameters. I mean, everyone remembers those times. And then the restaurant would shut down again because it was like a new wave, or like all that, blah, blah, blah. I had felt so penned in that I was like, and there was such a fear in the air, and I understand that, but for me personally, not wanting to spend my life in fear because I had spent so much of my life in anxiety, I wanted to get out of that fear and get out of the literal box that I'd been quarantined in. So I actually let go of every single thing that I owned. This was the first time I had let go of all of my decorations and artwork. I had beautiful flower paintings and sunset and ocean paintings, but it was funny. I always had this huge painting of the ocean that I carried around for years, and then I finally lived at the ocean. I'm like, why the hell would I look at this painting of an ocean when I could just go walk outside and be at the ocean? And so it was scary because some of these things I had had for decades, but something pushed me to it. And again, this is stimulus. Even if it's pretty and it's in your home, it's still attracting your attention and taking up some sort of your mental real estate. So I let go of everything except for a wardrobe that fit in one little suitcase, and I hit the road and traveled all of the Pacific Northwest in the United States, and it was absolutely amazing. I will do a deeper dive into my travels in another video, but that was a wonderful experience and very freeing to just have every single thing that I own fit in the trunk of my little Volkswagen Beetle. Okay, where are we at? 28 minutes. If you're still with me, thank you. We're getting to the end here. Kind of ironic that I'm talking about a stimulus addiction when I'm having you watch a 30-minute video, but I swear, I hope there's some helpful nuggets in here. So let's try to wrap this up. In the next year, now as I was coming to a sort of culmination of so many things pulled out of my life, so many distractions, and learning how to just be and be silent, there was still one big fat addiction that I was stuck on, and that was YouTube. Even though I did not have my channel back then, I was gobbling up things. And while yes, a lot of it really was helpful as far as things that I was learning with minimalism, things I was learning with veganism, things I was learning with intentional living and off-grid living, which I do want to do someday, things I was watching about full-time travel. It was all nourishing content, but it was still, I would find myself, I'd start with one video that was really helpful, and then all of a sudden I've been watching videos for 3 hours, and that was just still keeping me from being able to tune in and just be with myself. And I found that actually the more content I was consuming from other people had a place and a time, but I found I was starting to lose my own intuition. And because I was listening to so many teachers and gurus and voices from the outside, I was starting to lose sight of my own inner voice and my own inner drive. And so that's when I started to do YouTube fasts and really just say, okay, I'm quitting YouTube, and then just stay off of it for, initially I would say I'm quitting, and then I would last like a day, and then I would do it again and last like 3 days. And then eventually I got to one point where I had a month without it, and I found I was just so much more balanced, so much more centered, so much more calm without it. And I was starting to hear my inner voice and my intuition and my own truths come back to me, which is really important to me. But again, like any addiction, it can be difficult, and that one has bounced back and forth pretty much all of 2022, 2023, until the latter part of 2023. This was sort of the final stage of letting go. This was when I got off of coffee completely. I have another video about how I quit coffee in a deeper dive if you want to check that out. Coffee is chemically a stimulus, but I found because it's such an upper, it made me want to get shit done and do stuff, and I can't sit still because I need to go do stuff, and because you're literally high. And I knew it was bad for me, and I knew it wasn't serving, and that one took even longer to get off of than YouTube because I had been drinking it since my early 20s, but I did come off of it, and it's funny, addiction, I don't know if I would label myself an addict because I never was never was like an alcoholic or a drug addict, but I did have all these other sort of addictive tendencies in my life because I am an obsessive person. So maybe you would call me, I have an addictive personality, I guess. And I found if you have that, if you can just replace one addiction with another, and if you're doing something and you can't stop yourself from doing it, even though it's causing harm, that is not a good thing. And I found that if I would say, okay, I would like oscillate. I'd say, okay, I'm quitting coffee, but I'll keep watching YouTube. And then that wouldn't work because I'd feel out of balance. I'd say, okay, I'm quitting YouTube because for sure that's just too much and I need to hear my own voice, but I can treat myself to a coffee, but then I would get all cracked out and have anxiety from too much coffee. So I found that if I was giving myself permission to indulge in and be sucked into and too dependent on one thing, then I would end up just, addicted to all the things. So when I released both of those sort of at the same time, I was able to sort of transcend that need for a crutch or a security blanket in my life. And this was sort of like mid-summer last year, going into early fall, and going into Scorpio season. I'm big into being in tune with the seasons and being in tune with what nature is doing, going into hibernation season. That was sort of the final push into really, really deep silence that I've never really experienced in my life. And I would just started doing like very, very long stretches of absolute silence. Even the desire to listen to music started to fall away. Music still will always be a part of my life because I do think it's nourishing, but it was just this sort of deeper level of beingness that I don't even really want to mutilate the experience with words on it because it's a profoundly spiritual thing, but it has pulled me into a deeper experience of life and what it means to me to be a human, and it has pulled me into a much calmer state. I don't consider myself an anxious person anymore, and I am able to just be during the day. And it's interesting, from that space, a lot of creativity came out of that. I did so much deep silence in the fall and winter, and sort of emerging from that, this YouTube channel was birthed, and all of a sudden I had all these creative ideas where I felt like my creativity had been blocked for years and didn't know how to. I knew I wanted to express something new of myself, but I wasn't sure what. And doing those months of deep silence, that birthed out all of this creativity. So when you shut out all of the noise around you, whether it's social media or I don't even really read books that much anymore. I don't think books are bad for you. I think it's much better to read a book than scroll on Instagram, but it's still, as all these layers have fallen away, whether it's a huge wardrobe or drinking or coffee or going out with friends or being a workaholic or living in a crazy city or scrolling on Instagram, when all of that falls away, you can start to hear your inner voice and your inner truth and what wants to be expressed through you, whatever it may look like. We're all on our unique journey that will start to come through. Okay, this was a long one. If you stayed with me through the end, thank you. I hope there was some helpful insights in here for you, and hopefully you can start decluttering the stimulus and letting go of those addictions, even if that means no longer watching my channel. I do support that because I want people to feel healthy and whole and happy and come out of this modern society matrix and more connected into themselves and source energy and nature and love, because that is what truly matters. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.